Slow down, you move too fast. Gotta make the morning last. Kicking down the cobblestones, looking for fun and feeling groovy. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-dum, feeling groovy.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the bridge. We've got a great guest with us today, RJ Monton. Monton, is that how you say it? Monton?
Yeah, Monton. Yep.
Monton. And RJ is in educational consulting. He's going to tell us more about himself. But we are, welcome to the bridge. We're on episode 81, if you can believe that. We're moving right along. And I have a quote today. Sandy might be joining us. I don't know what happened to her. But this quote is from Michael Jordan, and it says, "Some people want it to happen. Some people wish it would happen, and others make it happen." And I have a hunch that RJ does a lot of helping people make it happen. Working with school people is... I don't know. People always say it's like herding cats, but it's just working with people. You've done a lot of that. RJ, why don't you introduce? Again, we met on LinkedIn, and what you do kind of attracted me, and so I wanted to invite you on the bridge. Welcome, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Gosh, yeah, thanks, Sue. Great to be here. RJ Monton. I'm the owner and I guess chief or lead consultant for Monton Consulting. I'm a career educator. I've been in education.
Can you hear me, RJ? Having a few technical difficulties. Are you back?
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there.
Okay. Like you said, we got the gremlins with us today.
Gosh, technology. I think maybe like yesterday was Veterans Day, and technology took the day off and hasn't restarted.
Worse than a Monday.
It really is. So you had asked, for me to introduce myself. So I'm a career educator. I have been working in education since I left undergrad. An interesting path, though, like my undergraduate is in outdoor recreation. And you brought up a point around adults that are like herding cats. One of the things when I taught outdoor education when I was living in New Hampshire, I was working with a population of students who had some significant behavioral challenges. And one of the things that I learned early on was like everyone has behavior that they learned over time that has allowed them to get their needs met, and adults are no different.
No.
Whether they have behavioral challenges or not, they are no different. We've just had a lot longer of a time to practice those behaviors of getting our needs met. So one of the things I do when I'm working with districts or schools or organizations is I look at getting district or building leadership or organizational leadership teams to basically work on changing their behavior. Yeah. And some of that requires them looking in the mirror. So ultimately what I do as a consultant working with these organizations is I help them understand their existing reality and then where they want to go, and then work on what are those logical steps that they have capacity to take, and where do they need to build capacity to kind of get to their dream. So that's ultimately what I do when I work with folks. But yeah, it's my path was outdoor education to special education to special ed coaching to administration to state work, and now consulting and doing some work with some charter schools. So yeah.
And as you say, it really is the same work. It's the human work.
Yeah. Whether it's special education or MTSS or working with grade level teams doing data dives, it's ultimately getting a team to look at what they're trying to do
Yeah,
and lean in on their strong skill sets to do that.
absolutely. I call it roles and goals,
Yep.
get clear, and then group development, which is meeting each learner right where they're at. And, I always say that adults are more shut down learners than kids are. They've been getting away with those behaviors for longer, and they're more entrenched in them. And like you said, they somehow have gotten some sort of a payback for it, so they continue it.
Yeah, we don't want to be told late in life that we maybe were doing it wrong or could have been doing it better for the
Yeah,
last 10,
yeah,
15 years. Yeah.
yeah. And, the basic human need is to be seen and heard.
Mhm.
And whether you're 3 years old or, 103, and a lot of times we'd never feel seen and heard when we're having conversations, when we're in meetings, and it's really a bobblehead meeting,
Yeah.
the administrators talking and not teaching, but talking.
Mhm.
And yeah, so what are you enjoying being a consultant on your own?
Yeah, I think so. I do. It's sort of like the passion work, right? So it's that's what it was born out of. Is like I had an opportunity, a couple months ago. Life sometimes presents you some things where you're like, okay, hold on a minute, you step back and like, what do I really want to do? And opening my own company was sort of one of those things that popped up. Was like, okay, like whether this becomes like the primary thing or not, like it's at least a way to tap into continuing to work with teams around some of those things. So like, you just said like, everyone wants to be seen and be heard. And I think one of the things that I've noticed in work with teams over my career is like not everyone, like everyone wants that, but they don't necessarily know what that is.
That's right.
So I think sometimes in leadership roles, when you're working with teams, it's short of just asking them like, hey, how would you like to be seen or heard? Sometimes they don't know how to answer that, like the individual team members. So it requires some digging from a leadership perspective to sort of get there in order to, I guess, sort of maximize the value of the team that you've either been put in charge of leading or been asked to lead. So I think that's one of those interesting nuances in not just unique to education, but like when you're working with teams saying like, hey, our goal is X. Like here's all the skills we have as folks to get there. I think part of understanding that team that you've been charged with leading is understanding how they want to receive feedback, like positive and constructive, like what motivates them, like what demotivates them too. Like because sometimes that's what I might think. Like I might say like, oh, Sue likes public call outs for like getting like, maybe not. Maybe that's completely aversive for you. So like let me not do that and shut you down as a contributing member of the team. So yeah. So I think those are the pieces that I enjoy, not necessarily like I enjoy the content of education. I've always had. That's what draws me to it. But like working with complex teams to solve problems. That's really sort of what I get excited about.
Right. And I got two questions. One is, well, this one's not really a question, it's a comment. I'm hunching that you learned and experienced working with individual students back in your days of working with behavioral challenges, in outdoor education. So you learned how to connect and figure out learning styles and receiving styles. And then so you're using the same thing now, and it's good because once people become administrators, they sometimes forget that they're educators. You know what I mean? They don't connect. They're not learners themselves. And unless I'm a learner with the team that I'm leading or working with, nobody comes. I always say judgment shuts down learning.
Yeah.
Even if I don't say it, even in my spirit, if I think, oh, this is a jerk, then we're not going to connect. But my question is a little bit outside of education, but not because your varied background tells me. Give me some of the traits that makes you an entrepreneur.
The traits that make me, I'm probably not a very good entrepreneur. This joking with folks years ago. Like my dad was an electrician.
Okay.
He was in the Navy and then he was an electrician, but he was a fantastic electrician, like owned his own business, terrible businessman. Like when he passed away and we were kind of cleaning up his estate, it was a mess.
Oh,
And I would say, like, you're asked, like, what makes me a good entrepreneur? I don't know if I am. Like, I would say that I would say if I had to like sort of like stroke my own ego, like I would say like I'm really good with teams. And I would say that makes me a valuable asset to leading teams. And if there's a way to turn that into a living, that could make me a good entrepreneur.
Okay. So I'm thinking that you sort of equate entrepreneurship with being a good businessman.
A little bit. Yeah.
Okay.
But
I
think,
yeah,
go ahead.
I was going to say, I would say courage and risk taking and kind of visioning what you want to do and knowing when you're doing what's right in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
Those are qualities, leadership qualities of entrepreneurs. The business, if you're an entrepreneur and you don't do the business right, you go out and get the help for it.
Yeah, that's true.
But the fact that you had the courage to take the leap and you saw, you kind of followed your passion and you're watching out for things and you're intuitive when it comes to your learners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say what makes so given that vein, and thanks for the correction on business versus entrepreneurship.
Not trying to correct you.
No,
yeah.
Well, it's helpful because now I have I would say I would already leave this conversation with a different personal definition of entrepreneurship versus like business. But I think one of the things I think that makes me a good entrepreneur is like recognizing where there's a need, mm-hmm. and maybe pushing against sort of conventional or established behavior to support teams with that need. Mm-hmm. So, and I say that in so bringing it back to something like education, like working with a school team or a district team around or adoption of some sort of practice within the district. So the conventional practices like look at a school district that's having success with something. Mm-hmm. Oh, did I disappear?
No, you're still there. You changed, just shading happened, but
all of my screens went blank for a second. The conventional practice has been like, okay, like what is the neighboring school district that's having success? What are they doing? And quick, let's just do what they're doing. And the problem is that fails so many times because that district's demographics are different. The actual process they went to look at this were different. Their budget is different. Like all these things that would sustain what their practice is and why they're having success with it is a completely different recipe in a district. Even if they're neighboring, if they share a border, like it's still different sometimes. So I think one thing that makes me good is I'm able to sit down and slow a team down to look at what they're trying to do and what are those sustainable steps to get there, and not just to get there, but also like it's sort of like if they want to do that and they don't have all the pieces, what are those smaller steps they need to take in order to develop either team cohesion or team expertise? If they can't develop it, where do they go acquire it? Like maybe it's like, hey, we have to hire somebody who has this expertise, or we need to stop doing something over here to free up money or time to do this because we've identified this as a priority. So I think what I do a good job at as an entrepreneur is sitting with teams and helping them ask those questions and look at it through a bigger lens, I guess.
I liked what you said when you said you slow the team down to mm-hmm. kind of lay all the pieces on the table, figure out what we have, who we are, and then what are the resources that we need to acquire. Yeah. And thereby we're not frantic, mm-hmm. Change sometimes comes in and it gets thrown in your lap. And then you, all of a sudden, Maslow's hierarchy, you don't feel safe. Yeah. They're going to fire me because I can't do this or whatever, you're just turned into frantic and survival mode comes in. And it sort of sounds like you have kind of a model that you use as you slow teams down.
A little bit. It's fluid depending on the context of the problem they're trying to solve or what they're going around. But one of the things that I I definitely try and balance is not just sort of like the technical pieces, like, hey, here are the protocols we can use, here's the tools we can adopt, but also some more of the like interpersonal team function pieces. And what I mean by that is, like, I mentioned before, like finding out how team members like to receive feedback.
Okay.
Right. So whether that's me leading the team or coaching another leader that's going to lead the team, it's sort of like, hey, you need to know like that Sue likes to receive feedback this way. You need to know that RJ does not like to receive that feedback this way. And that's important because that'll sort of make or break the morale of a team. And like finding out information like that and how team members make decisions. Like you don't necessarily want everyone that has an eye on the big picture. Like you also want those detail oriented folks, and you want those folks who also are, not impulsive is the wrong word, but I guess quick to make a decision, because sometimes a team gets stuck and you're like, hey, listen, like we've talked about this for 4 hours. We go. Right. So, and then you also need those folks in the team who are, I guess, looking out for everyone's emotional security, like having someone on the team to be like, hey, hold on a minute. Like, this is a big decision. Are we all okay? Or where, like, if we're not okay, what do we need to be okay? So
Sure.
I think as a leader or as someone coaching a leader, these are important factors. The other piece that's sort of like interesting is also to understand what motivates people to do things. So like, it's like how does that motivation show up in practice too? So like, I've worked like years ago, worked with somebody who would always question things. I'm like, why are they always questioning me? Like, until I realized that, like, oh wait, they're questioning, that's their engagement practice. Like they are asking questions, and that's how they're demonstrating they're engaged and they're on board doing this. So it's like, oh, okay, like that helps. I also have worked with people who I would call like a rebel. And I love having a rebel on the team because they typically look out for like where there might be a bias sometimes, where you're like, oh wait, hold on a minute. like they're always going against a decision, but they're sometimes playing devil's advocate just to make sure that we've looked at it from all angles. So
yeah,
I think as a leader, doing some of that work with the team that sort of takes away from, I guess, that technical process moving forward, but like sitting with the team to understand that at a little bit of the time, and like especially at the beginning, helps you sort of create momentum later on, right? Because you might get interesting questions from somebody, and if you didn't know that questioning was their engagement style, you might take that as like, oh wait, hold on, I said something wrong, something like
right.
So I think you asked if I have a formula. I don't necessarily have a formula, but it's definitely, I try to balance understanding teams from sort of their, I guess, their social emotional standpoint, like how they enter their work and why they enter their work, as well as the more tangible pieces of like what they're doing, how I see them doing it.
But from what I'm seeing is that you enter it as the lead learner, the teacher. Just like a teacher would get to know their students. You know your people well. You know how to motivate them. If you don't know how to motivate them, you know them well enough that you can ask them. And I'm hunching that some of this work about finding out about the individuals that you do in the group, so the whole group hears it.
Yeah. It's a balance of like, hey, here's some homework for you, here's homework as an individual, and here's how we share it out, so everyone at least knows, like oh my gosh, like RJ is like definitely, like, he's a big picture thinker. I understand that. Like, we used to use this joke with an old team where like I'd equate it to like the idea of like, hey, we're going to Disney World, like that's the big picture idea, but like I need to make sure as I'm looking at my team, I have somebody who's just like, who's the detail person. It's like, I don't care where we're going, but do we have socks? Do we have snacks for the drive? Like, do we have gas in the car, kind of a thing? So
absolutely blend everything all together.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about, because you kind of mentioned it when you were talking about behavior, but about accountability. How do you help leaders, or how do you hold people accountable for their behavior or their misbehavior?
So leaders, or those that leaders lead?
Well, I mean both, because if you're working with a leader that has a team, you're going to have to make sure the leader's capable of holding them accountable. you know, or the group is, you know, I call it norming,
Mhm.
forming and norming the group. But how do you manage that process?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and it's not the same all the time. But one of the things that I work with leaders on is like definitely like teaching them to pause, like whether it's like a hot second or like 10 minutes or sometimes a day, like they're that and in that pause, like what I work with them on is asking the questions like, okay, like if we're sitting down and you say something to me in a meeting that I was like, oh, that was surprising, and that like, or it felt like an attack, but it's like it feels public.
Mm-hmm.
Right away my brain wants to go to like, no. So, like I kind of want to either like I end up in that fight flight, you know, fawn, like in one of those. But if you pause for that second, you're like, okay, why is Sue reacting this way?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and if you begin to ask the question, or like as you say, like be that lead learner, I
Mm-hmm.
might understand that, like, oh wait, hold on a minute, like what do I know about Sue? Like this is like I begin to like get some more information and be like, okay, maybe there's something here that's like that is like I can see that Sue has passion about this topic or this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I may need to circle back and connect with Sue independently, or publicly. It might be like, hey, like thank you for your passion on this. I could see this, like we need to pause and actually address this. So it kind of depends. But one of the things I work with leaders on is the fact that there is no real misbehavior, because just like students, like behavior is communication. So
Mm-hmm.
if we see it as something that feels like an attack or like an affront to our leadership or the practice of the group,
Mm-hmm.
there's something there that's a piece of information that either needs to be sought out independently, or maybe it needs a greater platform
Sure.
within the group.
Sure. Yeah, I know that I like to bring conversations of norming open in the group so that people can hold each other accountable. But as a leader, I need to kind of start by holding people accountable. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the one example I use is usually respect, or mutual respect is a norm everybody wants to have.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ask each individual around the team, what does respect look like? And they have to say what it looks like. And I have somebody else paraphrase what they heard. What does disrespect look like? So
Mm-hmm.
disrespect when you roll your eyes at me, or when you correct your papers and I'm talking, that feels like disrespect.
Yep.
You've been in that room, haven't you?
Oh yeah. Yep.
And then the last one is, so how are we going to hold each other accountable?
Mm-hmm.
For when you disrespect me, I have the 36-hour rule, which is within 36 hours, you need to tell me that I offended you, and we'll work it out, or else I need to drop it.
Yeah.
You know, and so once those norms are established, it's a different conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and even the paraphrase helps. This,
Yeah.
wow, are you mad? No, I'm not mad. I'm just loud. You know, it just that kind of thing. And it sounds like you do that. And I think that it has to be done. I mean, we have to do that with our students in our classrooms, and also with our teams and our teachers and our leaders.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, every team has their own sort of like, and ends up getting to a point of like their own accepted norms of practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's on a leader to make sure that happens.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about, like, you know, storming and norming. I think there's a lot of leaders out there who are averse to the actual stage of storming.
Yeah.
Right. They want to pull a team together and they want to get to that you know, that performing stage, if we're looking at the 5 stages of team development. But
Sure.
like, I think you can't actually get there until you've figured out how to disagree as a team.
That's right.
And I think it's on the leader to sort of deliberately enter into that in a way that everyone has some emotional and psychological safety. Right. So like basically practicing disagreement through some manufactured processes before you get to the actual team disagreement.
Sure.
So otherwise you'll stay in that kind of fake norming or fake forming stage where everyone sort of gets along but doesn't really.
Yeah, and then that's where the bobblehead comes. We're bobblehead. We don't really agree with you, but we're, you know, let's get this meeting out of the way. Yeah, exactly. And if the leader I had a gal on last year. I worked with her. She was a middle school principal, and she was a wonderful head learner because she, as I was teaching her how to facilitate her team, um, she would like let me do one thing and then she'd take over. And I was right there kind of coaching her through it live in front of them. And it just, they loved it. They loved watching her learn. They loved her, and a lot of it's through paraphrase too, and letting people share their thoughts and what they heard, and just pausing, like you say, but did the whole group pause? Because it doesn't work when the leader just wants it done to get it done. It doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So no, that's fabulous. So what, you have a team now that you're working with, or a leader, or what's your current favorite team?
So right now, most of my, so two parallel things happening. One, like the consulting business, but also working for a charter school network.
Mhm.
And I'm working with a team that's trying to norm some practices around special education and really take it from sort of where it was, like where it currently is, I mean, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but get it to a place where it's essentially gone from like, hey, this is what we do, to like, it's so in the water that it's just understood, like, yeah, this is what we do.
Mhm.
Where the look shifts from some of the compliance pieces that states require to no, we're just going to engage in best practice, and
Do the best.
compliance.
Yeah.
Compliance is an unavoidable byproduct of what we're doing.
Mhm.
So it's a lot of that work, and some of it requires like some systematizing of things and
Yeah.
developing layers of tools and practices.
Embedding it.
Yeah, that can be built off of, not just as sort of a policy and practice piece, but then like building from that, like, okay, well, this is now our sort of like the spine of our special education process in the organization. Off of that, we're going to build sort of data awareness to where we can be like, okay, beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year, professional development.
That's great.
The data that we're getting from our practice is what's going to drive that, not necessarily like, hey, what are we going to do next week for professional development? So I think the more that we can kind of systematize it, the more it becomes driven by the best practice that teachers can engage in. And that's ultimately the goal, right? Like,
oh, absolutely. You're embedding it into the teacher's work so that the compliance forms are just something that they have to fill out. They're doing the work and thereby complying. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Yeah. That's authentic. And, the teacher should love that. I know some of them don't, because some of them like to open the book and just, teach the curriculum. But I used to always tell the teachers that they are the curriculum.
Yeah, and I get asked, like, some of these things are like, oh, well, like, are these things going to make my job easier? And I have to sort of be blunt and truthful, like, no, actually, like, teaching is an incredibly hard profession.
Yeah.
And like, if by engaging in some of these things, it's not going to make your job easier, but you're going to feel way better at the end of on end of the day on a Friday. Like, you will feel just as tired, but you'll feel tired and sort of like you'll feel like, okay, all of that effort was worth something. Versus like, oh my gosh, I did a bunch of compliance stuff and I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
You're going to be just as tired. You might as well be tired and be fulfilled as well.
And you've impacted the students and they're learning. They're learning, which is the whole point, rather than just, I remember, and it still goes on, people did, oh, I have to have the book. I have to, and the book might be a guide, but you've got to teach from your heart and know what you're doing and know if the kid's learning or not.
Yeah.
And it's really the same with adults.
Yep.
Because adults shut down just as quickly, if not more quickly, than kids.
Yeah, we have way more tools to shut down than the kids do. a lot more practice at figuring out how to do that.
Well, yeah, and a little different kind of accountability. We haven't been really good at holding adults accountable for their behavior and their outcomes, but mainly it's the behavior that shuts down learning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. You're doing good work. You're doing good work.
Trying to. It's I was talking to somebody and like, well, like they're like, how did you get here? And I was just like, well, I hate to say like I chased the problem, but that's ultimately what was happening. I was like teaching outdoor education, and I was like, oh, well, like this is great. Like, how can I adapt these practices to the classroom?
Uh-huh.
And I went back and got my master's and went like more special education route. And I was like, oh my gosh, we need more sort of like experiential project-based learning, like especially for some of our students who don't necessarily fit into the box of like traditional, P12 education, right?
Yeah.
Like, and then it was sort of like, oh wait, hold on a minute, our system isn't flexible enough to allow teachers with expertise to come in and do something different when they see a need. So then it became sort of like chasing that towards teacher coaching and systems change at a district level. And then mid-COVID, an opportunity was like, hey, could we do this? Could we expand this across the state? And I was like, this sounds like fun.
Yeah.
So,
well, and it's all about learning, because those special education kids, we have special education adults. That's because everybody has their own style of learning.
mm-hmm.
And until they understand that, they're not ever really going to understand how change happens.
Yeah.
And I used to teach at Bates Technical College, and the people there were convinced, because of K-12 education, that they were stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And they were basically hands-on learners. And so what I would tell them, I say, you guys are hands-on learners, and I would prove to them that you're actually smarter than the people that are the book learners, because you don't need the manual once you've done it.
Mm-hmm.
Once they've got the concept, they've done it with their hands, they've welded stuff together, or they've done their diesel mechanic stuff. They know it, it's in their body. And so they are the textbook.
Yeah.
And they are the geniuses that can actually produce a lot. And because they had been shut down for so many years and they thought they couldn't learn,
Mm-hmm.
and they're sometimes our geniuses. And we've got a lot of hands-on learners and in the school system, and the doers.
Yeah.
And then those younger kids can't learn unless they're moving,
Mm-hmm.
unless they're running around. And so tell me how you have, I'm having fun these days with all the neuroscience that's going on with changing your brain patterns, from your default negative stuff into creating new pathways in your brain to think differently. Tell me how some of that is impacting the work you're doing, or is it?
No, it's actually, it's really, I mean, without going too deep, I think mental wellness is one of those things that is like often overlooked in many fields. I mean, especially in education. I mean, years ago, meeting with like doing some work on a tiered team in a district, I was meeting with one of our outside counselors, and the idea of like trauma fatigue became sort of, I hate to say a buzzword, became something we were aware of as leaders in the district, and just thinking about how educators show up, especially as student needs have increased over time, and really the system to deliver support for those needs has not expanded or built, we've not seen any increased capacity really. Like our school, we still have 180 days and like a 6.5 hour school day. And we keep trying to put more into that day, and we're not addressing the social emotional needs of students like we should. So one of the things that I think about is some of the research that's coming out where like basically, if it's coming out of psychology, if you tell yourself a story enough times, your body and your brain knows it, right? You knows it as truth. It can't discern that truth from whatever you're telling yourself. So if you are going into your job every day, you're going into work and you're telling yourself it's so hard, it's impossible, we can't do this, we can't move this rock, eventually your body just believes that.
Yeah.
Right. And then you sit back and it's
trying, yeah.
So one of the things that I've worked with teams around, this is around some data culture pieces, and then going back to the idea of communication, is how like sometimes when you're doing like big systems work, like the change, like if the thing you're trying to move doesn't, like, you could spend your career doing it. If it moves 2 degrees, that's like a celebration. But one of the things that's often overlooked is like when leaders can like take the time to look at like, okay, here are all the smaller metrics that we have moved to make that possible. So like when we as a team pass the baton to the next team to take this on, they can know that it's already moved this much.
Mm-hmm.
And by telling that story, like those successes frequently and publicly and with very targeted pieces of information, can allow teams can allow that organizational groupthink to be more positive and be a little bit less like, well, now we can't do this because the state says this, or now we can't do that. Like,
Right.
It shifts to like, okay, cool, here's an opportunity. Like I think it's one of those things that leaders can lean into is this idea of like the psychology of groupthink, or the psychology of how collective brains will come together to believe a story, to then sort of like own that. So, I mean, I'm not saying lie, but I'm saying like,
no, it isn't lying, but it's creating a new story.
Yes, we can believe the negative pieces and own that, or we can be aware of them, but we can also see the positive pieces and build off of that.
Yeah, that reminds me, I just had a knee replacement a couple weeks ago, and in my recovery, I pretty much every day is baby steps forward. And but I have some days that don't feel like I'm going forward. So I've changed my language into, I have baby step days and I have baby step days. And it reminds me of what you're talking about. I mean, as long as we're moving forward, we're going in the right direction, even if it's a baby step. And sometimes those tinier steps under that rock make more of an impact, this year than they would have last year, because we got underneath. You're getting to the root of it. So no, that's really good. I think the new brain research is really good because it helps us understand people and understand ourselves.
Yeah, and this is interesting. A couple of years ago, I was at a conference, and this brain researcher, her name will come to me as soon as we finish this talk. I'm sure of it. But we were talking about we were being presented like how we group students in school is like completely wrong. Like we group them based on like chronological age, as if all people experience the same thing, like the same way, and like by 5 years old, they are kindergarten ready. Like it's such an interesting like concept that like, oh yeah, why, like, what does it go back to? And like some of the roots of public ed sort of dictate like that's why, like it, and some of it is still sort of like, well, it's easier that way because all the chairs are the same size in the classroom. It's like, well, that's great, except a classroom of 20 kindergartners, like their lived experience up to that point should be the way that we sort them in order to teach them. If we were to do that, or we can flip the model and adopt something like the concept of kindergarten ready as like what the school and the teacher do to be ready for the students coming in versus like getting the student ready. So I think that's the other piece, is making sure that like as leaders in this work, or people who lead teams, or people who are even on teams, like being aware that like, okay, just because I'm in education doesn't mean that I've had the same like 45-year experience that like my collaborator next to me might have had. So I think that's such a key piece in some of the emerging sort of like the brain science is thinking about like, okay, not all of us got to this table the same way, and
experience is different. You know what I mean? Just because I have 30 years of experience doesn't mean it's the same experience as someone else with 30 years.
Yeah.
Because I've focused on different things and I have strength, and how can I work on my strengths and not just work on what I'm not good at. You know what I mean? We get much farther if we like our strengths and we like to do that. We're going to be motivated rather than being motivated or demotivated or criticized.
Yeah.
Oh, you're doing fascinating work. I love school change work.
talk with friends around like, research versus implementation. So for me, it's exciting because it's like you're in there at the table and like you have the existing research that exists somewhere, but you're trying to close that gap.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that gap is created by, I think, like a human resistance to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right? So part of it is like how as a leader or, facilitator of a team, do you get people just uncomfortable enough to learn something or see something and then feel compelled to change, whether it's their own behavior or change how the group operates.
Well, and my story is that you embody that. That's part of why I'm calling you an entrepreneur, because you're a risk taker. You're willing to go outside your comfort zone to try something new, and that is really the heart of an entrepreneur, and seeing new things. You see new opportunities and ideas rather than just doing the same old, same old. So I think you need to start calling yourself an educational entrepreneur.
Educate. Okay. E squared. Go for
Yeah,
that.
yeah. You get your diploma from me. How's
Yeah.
that?
Thank you.
So, anything else that you want to tell us?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I guess the thing that excites me is sort of like working with teams and looking at, like, I think organizational behavior. And some of that is, when I'm invited in to work with a team, it's not only looking at how they operate in, like, as those sitting around the table, but how they operate in the context, of the organization that they're part of, or in the environment that they're part of, because sometimes, like, what they want to do or what they're trying to solve is like completely incongruent with the values of the organization.
Yeah.
And sometimes saying that out loud is just sort of like, hey, like, I know you want to do this. I don't see how you're going to do this when the goal of your organization is this over here.
Else and do it.
Yeah. So maybe, like, and if the organization is asking them to do that, it's sort of like, well, what is the true ask of this?
Yeah.
Or do they even realize the two are in conflict? So I think sometimes some of my favorite things that I get to do is ask some of these questions where people are like, wait, what? Like, when, like, it's something that they don't think of, and it's just, or just throw something out there like, look, like, in order to do this thing you want to do, we have to stop doing 3 things. What 3 things? Sure. And if they say no, it's like, well, I guess that's not that important.
Yeah. I know the people that I've coached for years, they'll call me up and they know the first question I'm going to ask them. So what is your role and what is the goal?
Yeah.
And often leaders aren't clear about their role and goal.
Yeah.
And then, they're the boss, and the people that are on their team are the implementers, and they get input from them, but they're not the boss. You need to focus on the goal.
Yeah.
And so that's good. That's good.
And it's getting them to own that leadership gap of like, hey, here's where we have sort of a responsibility, and here's where we have authority. And sometimes that gap in between is uncontrollable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's getting them to recognize that, like, you can influence to a certain amount, but if, like, the organizational culture won't allow something to be able to be spread or scaled, that's something to address first.
I have one of the early podcasts that we've done. I've got a decision-making style list, and it's very helpful. I give it to the team, and it's basically, the first one is FYI. The leader just says this is the way it is. It's a mandate. Next one is the leader decides with a little bit of input. Then the leader decides with more input. Then it's voting. And then it's very rarely consensus, because consensus takes too much time. And it's real helpful because it helps the team members realize that they don't have, what kind of influence they have, so that they don't get worn out. So I can either send it to you or you can look it up. It's either podcast 4 or 5 or something. It's just an audio. So RJ, what we usually go back and say, what's one takeaway? So from our conversation, what's one takeaway for you?
Big takeaway is looking at what, like, definitely adopting a new definition of entrepreneur.
Okay.
I will definitely take that away. And I think this conversation has allowed me to sort of like, I think through again, just like verbally, like what it is that I do. I think sometimes I'll say like, hey, I go and I coach educational teams.
Yeah.
But that's sort of like, okay, we'll coach and do better at what they currently do. It's like, well, no, actually I kind of coach them to do different. So
yeah, people don't often know what team people do.
yeah.
So it's kind of nice to talk to somebody who's in the business. And anytime you want to come back and discuss some more, I'd be happy to. And I've got some other people that love this work that would too. So my takeaway is that you are doing the work. You're educating the adults in the system through the organizational work, and it's lovely. I mean, the thing I like about organizational change, you look at a big district and it's many people, but you go down to your classroom and that's an organization.
Mm-hmm.
And you come back to your family. Your family is an organization. And I even like to say that me individually, I'm an organization. I have to be the sponsor of my own role and goal for my life.
Yeah.
And do what's important to me. And so organizational work is just sort of life.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I think the like integrated family systems, like psychology and like counseling work would say that like, we are made up of a bunch of parts, and therefore like we are an organization. We all have our own little boardroom going on somewhere.
yeah,
in our head.
that's true.
So,
That's true. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to stop our recording, but I'd like you to hang on just for a second.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
so hold tight. Bye-bye, everybody.